and welcome to Diabetes Connections in the News. I'm Stacey Simms. Every other Friday, I bring you a short episode with the top diabetes stories and headlines happening now. In the News is brought to you by Edgepark. Simplify your diabetes journey with Edgepark. Our top story this week, a recall of pump infusion sets. This is the ViaCyte infusion set used with tandem diabetes pumps. Now, the recall here isn't new. It came out a few weeks ago, but the FDA just changed the rating to Class 1. It's most serious. The ViaCyte version is flexible. This is an angled insertion, and it's usually recommended for people who are thinner or have scar tissue. The problem is that the connector can detach from the set, which means no insulin is going in. To date, according to the FDA, there has only been one report of any injury related to the recall. An already existing drug may help preserve beta cell function in people with new onset type 1. It's got a very long name, so it is usually referred to as DFMO. It inhibits a pathway which plays a role in inflammatory responses in autoimmune diseases. Now, it's already sold under a few names for different conditions, including Vanica, which is a cream for unwanted hair growth. It also has orphan designations for treating various cancers. This new safety study was pretty small, about 41 people, including 31 kids. It was published in Cell Medicine Reports. After 6 months, C-peptide, a measure of beta cell function, was significantly higher with the 3 highest DFMO doses compared to placebo. New results from ViaCyte clinical trials, that's a stem cell-based treatment for type 1. The therapy aims to replace insulin-producing beta cells. Dubbed VCO2, this is a small medical implant that contains millions of lab-grown pancreatic islet cells. The devices are described as about the size of a Band-Aid and no thicker than a credit card. They're implanted just under the skin. This clinical trial had 10 participants, each of whom had no detectable insulin production at the start. 6 months later, 3 people showed significant markers of insulin production and maintained those levels throughout the remainder of the year-long study. They spent more time in an optimal blood glucose range and reduced their intake of administered insulin. One participant showed remarkable improvement, with time in range increasing from 55% to 85% and a 44% reduction in their daily insulin dosing. There's another ongoing trial of this with a version of the device containing cells that have been genetically engineered to evade the immune system using CRISPR gene editing technology. It's hoped that that could eliminate the need for people to take immunosuppressant drugs alongside the treatment. A new look at sleep quality in people with diabetes, finding that more time in range means better sleep. No surprise here, but it is important to quantify this kind of stuff. Interestingly, recurrent high or low blood sugar, rather than constant or prolonged out-of-range levels, seemed associated with worse sleep. Another study in adults with type 1 showed that 17% wake up every night and 53% wake up once or twice a week. Another sleep study looking at women and insulin sensitivity. This was a small study, but 40 women, which found that particularly postmenopausal women who sleep less than 7 hours per night may have impaired insulin sensitivity regardless of body fat. These women were randomly assigned to either restricted sleep or adequate sleep for 6 weeks, and then they crossed over to the other sleep condition. During the restriction, women slept about 6.2 hours per night versus 7 to 9 hours per night. Both fasting insulin levels and resistance were significantly increased during sleep restriction, with more insulin needed to normalize glucose. These researchers say if sustained over time, it's possible that prolonged insufficient sleep among those with prediabetes could accelerate the progression to type 2. Pregnant women with type 2 who used CGM saw improvement in blood glucose levels, but only if they used the device more than 50% of the time during their pregnancy. This study involved high-risk women from regional and remote Australia, all with type 2. No changes in diabetes metrics were seen in those who used the CGM only early or only late in their pregnancies. Bad news for cinnamon. Despite earlier promising findings, it seems unlikely that cinnamon can improve blood sugar levels in people with type 1. This is not a joke. This is a real study. Previous research has shown that cinnamon appears to help fat cells recognize and respond to insulin in test tube experiments and in animal studies. Cinnamon led to an increase in the processing of glucose. And in another study in people with type 2, Those who incorporated a small amount of cinnamon each day for 40 days into their normal diets experienced a healthy drop of blood sugar levels. But a new study of teens with type 1 showed cinnamon made no difference at all after 90 days. In fact, quote, in essentially all outcomes, the trend favored the placebo group, although that did not achieve statistical significance. Diabetes Connections in the News is brought to you by Edgepark. Managing diabetes doesn't need to get in the way of your passions, your social life, or your budget. Edgepark can help you simplify your diabetes journey so you can focus on other important things. Edgepark offers a wide array of continuous glucose monitors, such as the Dexcom G7, Freestyle Libre 3, and more. Plus, Edgepark accepts most insurance plans and handles the paperwork. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Edgepark logo. When it comes to walking and type 2 diabetes risk, it's not just how much you do that helps, it's how fast you move. Brisk walking is associated with a nearly 40% lower risk of developing type 2 later in life. This is a study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. So how fast are we talking here? Easy or casual walking was defined as less than 2 miles per hour. Average or normal pace, 2 to 3 miles per hour. Fairly brisk, 3 to 4 miles per hour. And brisk stride walking was more than 4 miles per hour. So you really got to work up a sweat. Beyond Type 2 is holding their very first virtual Type 2 summit. They say whether you are newly diagnosed or somebody who's been living with diabetes for a long time, they'd love for you to join. This is Wednesday, December 6th. It is 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, but it is on Zoom. They've got workshops like cooking and exercise demonstrations and ways to connect with other people along with inspiring speakers. I will link up all of the information in the show notes. Coming up on the podcasts next week, yep, that is podcasts now, plural, Diabetes Connections Type 2. We've actually wrapped up the initial launch. I had planned this as a limited launch, as a few episodes to gauge interest. The first 8 episodes are out, and I'm really excited to tell you that interest is great. Thank you all so much for your support. We will be continuing with this podcast in 2024, so stay tuned for that. We will return in January. For Diabetes Connections, the original show, I'm going to be sharing a panel that we did at Mom's Night Out Frisco, the one in Texas. This was a conversation between me and another mom where she talked about her experience having to administer emergency glucagon, what that was like, what she learned from it, and what she wants us all to know. That's next week. The previous episode of Diabetes Connections is with Mila Clark, who was misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes. She actually lives with LADA. Her story, you may know her better as the Hangry Woman. She is just an excellent advocate, and I was thrilled to talk to her. All right, thank you so much for joining me. If you like In the News, please share it. Thanks, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. I'm Stacey Simms. I'll see you back here soon.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.